Hey everybody, Mary here for Mary's Heirloom Seeds, and welcome to my weekly live chat. I try to go live here on YouTube every Thursday at 5 p.m. Central Time. Today I'm inside. It's a little hot outside. So since we're talking about soil amendments, I figured I could go inside and not have to be outside in the heat, getting eaten alive by the skeeters. So I hope you can join me, take a seat, grab something to drink, grab a snack, and let's chat about soil amendments and soil health. So if you're just joining me for the first time, welcome. For those of you that join me regularly, welcome back. If you get a chance, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Every single video, I always mention that in the description section, you will find links to pretty much everything I'm going to discuss tonight. Hey Jill, thanks for joining us. You've got my comprehensive planting guide. You've got information on our soil amendments. There is a link to sign up for our emails, and there's some pretty exciting stuff that I'm going to be sending in emails this week. Hey Jackie Jacks, thanks for joining me. And also a video about plant health Q&A that I'm going to reference during this video. So tonight's topic is, which soil amendments do I use? Hey Caitlin, thanks for joining me. And Christine, thank you very much. So this was a special request from one of my customers. And of course, I always try and help. Hey Jenny, thanks for joining me. And Inga's here as well. We've got a lot of our regulars here joining me. If you haven't already, check out all the videos that we've done after the live chat. There are so many live videos and lots of different videos that we've done before. Hey Laughing Gardens as well. I'm also going to talk about a little bit about the feeding schedule I do for my plants as well as soil health. Hey, Kid Anthony made it as well. So none of the soil amendments that we offer are extremely high in any specific nutrients. Hey Jennifer B, thanks for joining me. It has been a crazy week already. So even without a soil test, you can still use all of these soil amendments in your garden. But I'm also going to share a little bit of information about helping you balance your soil. Patriots Rabbitry is here as well. Thank you for joining us. Now, if I'm starting seeds, generally I wait until, if I'm doing seeds indoors or in containers, so we're not talking about in ground, we're going to talk about how we're just now getting started. And I'm going to be starting some seeds in trays. Now, generally, I've already discussed the different, in our Seed Starting 101 video, I discussed all of the different options for seed starting. I generally use coconut coir, a little bit of compost, and some perlite. Hey, Christian, thanks for joining me when I'm getting started with seeds. But seeds don't need nutrients to germinate, right? So I generally wait until my seedlings have their first set of true leaves. And then I will use Mountain Flower Compost Tea. And I will use a diluted version, so it comes in a pack of 1 gallon or 5 gallons. And if I do a 1 gallon, for example, I'll take 1 packet and I'll dilute it into 2 gallons. That way I'm not using it at full strength. And I usually do this every 2 to 3 weeks until I transplant. And generally that's only about twice during the growing season, because I don't do a lot of long-term seed starting. We have a fairly long growing season here, so I don't really have to worry about doing too much in containers, in seed starting trays to transplant out. Now, there are only about 4 or 5 soil amendments that I use, plus some natural inputs that I use as well, and I use these every year in my garden. So first I'm going to discuss with you what I use, and then I'm going to discuss with you how often I use it, and then also how you can, the information about what it is. So Christian says, do you sell Mountain Flower Compost Tea on your website? And the answer to that is yes. So everything that not everything, but I'll get to that in just a second. Most of what I'm going to discuss with you today is available at Mary's Heirloom Seeds. In the description section of this video, you'll find a link to our soil amendments. Just click that link and you'll find everything I'm going to share with you here. So what I usually do is, if I am refreshing a bed, so let's say it's springtime and I'm clearing out all the junk that was left over from the wintertime, and I'm going to start with a fresh bed. So I already have some soil in there. I'm going to use Mountain Flower Root Boost and Micronized Azomite, both available at Mary's Heirloom Seeds. And then I'm going to top it with a good layer of aged compost. Aged compost is fantastic in your garden. It's got plenty of nutrients, and it also should be nice and fluffy and perfect for seed starting. Now, when I am transplanting a seedling into a bed, so let's say I've got my bed already ready to go and I've got things already growing. So maybe it's summertime, maybe I pulled out some fall crops or spring crops, and now I'm going to be transplanting some seedlings into my garden. I'm going to use Mountain Flower Root Boost and Azomite. And generally what I'll do is I'll scoop a little more of a wider of or a deeper of a hole than I'm going to actually need to transplant. And then I'll mix in those soil amendments and then I'll transplant. So for example, I'm going to look at the instructions here for Mountain Flower Root Boost. This is a teeny sample pack. This is not something I sell. It says for transplanting, mix 1 to 2 tablespoons into soil when planting. I only use 1. I generally go for the lowest amount that is recommended on the instructions. Now, while this isn't water soluble, you can give it a good side dressing if you want to, if you already have plants and maybe they're struggling and you want to add something to it. So when I'm transplanting, I will use Mountain Flower Root Boost and Micronized Azomite. One other possibility, if you're not sure or maybe your plants are struggling, generally I will, Inga, I'm going to tell you that in just a second. Super Kelp is an excellent water soluble tea. Hey Matt Farms and hey Kathleen Moran. Just give me just a second, Inga, and I'm going to share with you the specifics about the Mountain Flower Root Boost as well as the tea. They are completely different options. Hey Desiree, thanks for joining us as well. Now, if you are transplanting and you've experienced transplant shock, some people have expressed that they've transplanted something and either it just gets stunted or maybe it just goes into shock and doesn't do very well. Super Kelp is an excellent water soluble option. I'm going to go over all of the specifics of each of these things as soon as I'm done with my basic 4 that I use for the year. Then during the growing season, so we've already refreshed our beds. Missy Smith says you love the Mountain Flower Root Boost. Thank you very much. I mentioned earlier in the video, it is definitely a customer favorite. If you see the reviews on our website, they're just fantastic. So it's definitely a bonus. I just actually recently added a 5-pound option to it because people loved it so much. So during the growing season, hey Ambia, thanks for joining us. I will usually feed my heavy feeders Mountain Flower Compost Tea. That is a powder that is water soluble and it comes in a 1 gallon or 5 gallon. And I use those for my heavy feeders about every 3 to 4 weeks. And those heavy feeders are going to include squash, eggplant, zucchini. I mean, come on, we've seen these giant zucchinis and it's because we've got some awesome soil amendments in there. Tomatoes, peppers, garlic, corn, melon, and cucumbers are a good list of heavy feeders. So those are going to need a little more nutrients than some of the other crops you're growing. For example, I don't fertilize lettuce. I don't even fertilize collards or Swiss chard. Most of the greens don't need a lot of heavy, they should not get a lot of heavy nutrients because it just doesn't work for them. Whereas your tomatoes, I mean, come on, they are producing some deliciousness that you really want to make sure that you feed them. So I mentioned earlier, while the mix of the Mountain Flower Root Boost should be added to your soil, it can be used as a side dressing. Azomite can be also mixed into a 1 gallon or 5 gallon bucket. You're still going to have a little bit of residue because it's not completely water soluble, but it is something that will benefit your plants. And I'll tell you why in just a second. So Inga asks, what is Mountain Flower Root Boost? What is it made of? So Mountain Flower Root Boost, the NPK is 542. That is your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Hey, Agape Field, thanks for joining me. So you notice I don't have a super high number of those. I mentioned that earlier. The Mountain Flower Root Boost contains things like fishbone meal, fish meal, langbonite, humic acid, mycorrhiza fungi, which is a very beneficial fungus in your garden. I know it sounds crazy, right? You're adding something fungi in there. And it also has beneficial bacteria. So there's actually beneficial bacteria and not so good bacteria for your garden. And that will help build soil health. Your soil should be a web of life and not necessarily something that you just dump a bunch of fertilizer in and hope something comes up. We are all about doing things as naturally as possible. So the ingredients in the Mountain Flower Root Boost are on the natural side. Now, what is azomite? Azomite is volcanic rock that contains over 70 minerals and trace elements that are optimal for plant health. So your macronutrients are going to be your NPK, and that's the 3 numbers you're going to see. Let's see if I can find one here. All right, I'm going to talk about blood meal in just a second, but show you this on your NPK. You got your 1200. So that means the NPK, I got Max joining me here for my video. Hi, Max. So that means your NPK, for example, for blood meal is 1200. So it's a high nitrogen, and I'll share that with you in just a second. Tiny tears. So just like your body needs the macronutrients, your body also needs the micronutrients, which is where the azomite comes in. It is absolutely fantastic for root growth. So that's why I love using it in all my beds, but specifically your garlic will thank you. And it'll show you by growing some amazing garlic. Hey, Max. Now, what is Super Kelp? Super Kelp is an instant kelp meal tea. I mentioned it earlier for our transplant shock. You want to help minimize any kind of shock once you transplant your seedlings. And that is a 0017. So it's fantastic. It's not high in nitrogen. There's not it's NPK. It's your potassium. So that's a really good one to help with, to keep away the plant shock. And then the next one is, what is Mountain Flower Compost Tea? So Mountain Flower Root Boost is not water soluble. Mountain Flower Compost Tea is water soluble, and the NPK is 655, but it also contains calcium and trace minerals, which is why I use it as a liquid feed while my plants are growing. You don't really need that 20-20-20. If you have too much nitrogen, I mentioned this in the plant health video. If you have too much nitrogen, you're gonna have to get this beautiful plant greenery growth, and you're not gonna have as much to harvest. But then if you're missing some of the nutrients, you might have some other issues develop. So super important. Now, back to the video I mentioned. Earlier this year, I hosted a live chat about plant health, and it was plant health Q&A. And it was how to recognize the signs of plant stress versus nutrient deficiencies compared to diseases. Oh, Inga, you are way ahead of me. Let's see. So Inga says, so would you be able to use the tea also for when you lack calcium, like Blossom End Rot? Yes, you can, but I have another option for you as well, and that's actually literally next on my list. So in the description section of this video, you'll find a link to my video that's Plant Health Q&A. And I did mention the Blossom End Rot in that one as well. But I also mentioned some like magnesium deficiency for your peppers, nitrogen deficiency for your tomatoes or your peppers. So that's a great video to watch, because if you're looking at it and you're going, is this blight? Or is this magnesium deficiency, for example? So that's a really good video to watch after this video as well. So if you've got some questions and I didn't answer it in my videos, send me an email. My email is mary@marysheirloomseeds.com, and I do try to answer those questions. Now, for Inga's question, which was excellent, Blossom End Rot. If you are experiencing blossom end rot, which is commonly BER, if you see it on social media or whatever, it's called BER, Blossom End Rot. It is caused by watering inconsistently and or calcium magnesium deficiency, mostly calcium. And the reason I say and or is because if you have a period of too much rain, it could be caused by too much rain, but it also could be because too much rain and your plant can't uptake the calcium that it needs to produce healthy fruits. So what I use is, again, you can find this at Mary's Heirloom Seeds, which is a calcium magnesium powder that is water soluble. You add it to a gallon of water, you feed your plants, and it works. I've had people email me and say it works like magic. Hey, Kim Anthony, thank you so much. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. So if you're experiencing BER right now, adding eggshells or oyster shells to your garden is not going to fix the problem today. It's going to fix the problem for your next crop. If you want to save that plant, I highly recommend using the calcium magnesium supplement that we have. It comes in 2 ounces or 8 ounces. You add the necessary bits to a gallon of water or 2 gallons of water, and then you feed your plants. Now, it may not help the tomatoes, for example, that are already experiencing blossom end rot, but for future fruit that plant will produce, they should be significantly healthier. And I've experienced this myself. I generally don't have calcium issues or blossom end rot issues, but I did have some in the past, and I've used this successfully, and it really helped my plants. So that's something you can do. Now, if you have calcium deficiencies now in your garden, or let's say you had a soil test, like I had my soil tested, and let's say that your soil was deficient in calcium. Well, you can add eggshells from your own kitchen. You can add oyster shell, which we carry at Mary's Heirloom Seeds, and you can add that in the fall, say for example, for your next crop. So that will be fantastic for the future. But if you're experiencing BER now, it isn't necessarily going to fix it right away. So my soil test. So earlier this year, I had my soil tested, and I'm really sorry. I started a video series about the reasons for having your soil tested, and I didn't finish it because it got really crazy around here, and the seed shop got wild. And I've been working on your seed orders, and I've been expanding my gardens, and I never actually followed up with the second video, or the third video for that matter. But just to sum it up, I had my soil tested, and it was deficient in nitrogen, not super low, like not non-existent, but it was lower in nitrogen, but the phosphorus and the potassium was fine. Now, keeping in mind, this is the end of the year. You can have your soil tested at any time of the year, but this is just when I had time to do it, honestly. I mean, let's be honest. Sometimes, especially during planting season and harvesting season, it gets crazy, and you may not have time, or just slips your mind and you don't actually get it done. So both of the soil tests that I had showed lower in nitrogen, but potassium and phosphorus was okay. So in order to fix this in my soil, I added blood meal. And there's a couple things you can do on top of that, but blood meal was what I did. Blood meal has a NPK of 1200, so it was a perfect addition to my garden. Let's see. Yep. And I've actually done that myself as well. But the problem is, if you're not, if you need it right this second, you may not have time to make your own calcium spray or foliar feed. So blood meal's NPK is 1200, so it was perfect for my raised beds. Here's a benefit to you though. The scent serves as a deterrent to common pests like rabbits and deer. So if that's something you're looking for, that's a really good one. It also helps accelerate your compost. So you can add it to water and put it in your compost, or you can just sprinkle it in there and you're good to go. Now there's a couple other things that you can do that have absolutely nothing to do with things that I offer at Mary's Heirloom Seeds. And the first of those is worms. You can use worm castings in your garden beds. You can use worm castings to make your own tea. And if you're like me and you don't have the time or the energy to make your own worm tea, you can always check out the ladies at KNC Worm Farm. When I'm done with this video, I'll share a link to their website. I'm not affiliated with them at all. I just love their products because I have used their products in the past. I've used their not only their worm castings, but also their worm tea, and it's fantastic as a foliar feed. But it's also amazing to use if you've got Japanese beetle infestations in your, not just in your garden, but also in your grass. So if you've got a lawn, I kind of shy away from the lawn, but if you've got a lawn and you've got Japanese beetles, definitely check them out. Does worm compost do the same as blood meal as far as keeping pests away? I don't know. That's a great question. And maybe Christine can chime in for me. We've got KNC Worm Farm sometimes watching us on the videos. But worm tea is fantastic for pest control. I just mentioned Japanese beetles, for example. If you are on social media, check out KNC Worm Farm on Facebook. They have been doing a series almost, like every day. They've got something about what worm tea works for, so that's really good. And another option is compost. So if you're like me, you take the scraps from your kitchen and you add it to your compost. So you're already adding eggshells to your compost. There's less of a need to treat things like calcium deficiency if you feed your garden with things like homegrown compost with things like eggshells in it. So instead of having to fight sometimes those deficiencies in your garden, it's best to think ahead, plan ahead, start a compost pile. So another recent video I did months ago was different ways to make a compost pile. You got a bin, you got a bucket, you got a pile, and there's tumblers. I mean, you could buy the fancy pants stuff. I don't buy the fancy pants stuff, but you can. You could literally just make a pile for your compost, and that way you're adding beneficial nutrients to your soil without having to pay for it, without having to add any outside inputs. So those are some things that you can do as well that will really benefit your garden. Agape Field says, my goal is to have no grass lawn, ground covers like micro clover. Awesome. Yeah, so we have what I call my front forest. It's not a lawn, there's trees, and I just scattered wildflower seeds and clover seeds all over it. And that was what prompted me to offer more bulk seeds. So more bulk flowers, bulk clover seeds, and you can just scatter them out in the yard and they will grow and produce, and it's amazing stuff. So what I have shared with you so far is the basics of what I use. Like I mentioned, today's topic was because one of my customers reached out to me and said, hey, I'd really like to know what your soil amendments that you use in your garden and what's the schedule. And I honestly try to keep it as simple as possible. So when I refresh my bed, Azomite, Root Boost. When I feed my plants, Mountain Flower Compost Tea. When I transplant, sometimes if I'm dealing with some shock issues, I'll use the Super Kelp. And then again, there's so many different options available at Mary's Heirloom Seeds. We've got fish meal, we've got fish bone meal, we've got bone meal, we've got oyster shell. So there's a lot of great options. We've got alfalfa meal. So all of these different things have a different benefit to your garden. Sometimes I've used kelp meal to make a tea. I've used alfalfa meal to make a tea. There's humic acid, there's langbeinite that is a nutrient in its own. So really, if you have a soil test done and you know exactly what you are deficient in, you can kind of work on it that way. But kind of a easy option is the Mountain Flower Root Boost and the Azomite, because that's really just my go-to no matter what. And like I mentioned, I had my soil tested and I worked it out so that I had a healthy balance in my soil. So if you have any questions, you can always reach out. My email is mary@marysheirloomseeds.com. If I didn't answer your questions during the live chat, please reach out. Leave us a comment. Tell me if you've got any questions. In the description section of this video, you'll find a link to my comprehensive planting guide. You'll find a link to sign up for my email. So I mentioned today about soil amendments. I recently sent out an email with 5 garden and seed related worksheets. They're free printables. They're super easy to use. If you were already signed up for my email and you did not receive it, send me an email. Let me know what happened. Again, my email is mary@marysheirloomseeds.com, and I'll try and track it down for you. But these worksheets are fantastic, and there is one that will help you kind of schedule your soil amendments or your treatments and things like that. It might help you get a little more organized. Alrighty, everybody, Esther's daughter, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I am Mary at Mary's Heirloom Seeds signing off, and happy planting, everybody.